No one was supposed to notice the janitor that morning. He stood at the back of the graduation hall, hands shaking inside a faded blue uniform. In exactly 1 hour, his daughter would walk onto the stage. The students who mocked her daily laughed nearby, unaware. They called her the janitor's daughter, like it was a verdict. What they didn't know was this. Every insult, every laugh, every ignored glance had prepared her for this moment. Today, silence would replace laughter, truth would replace judgment. And when her name was spoken, everything they believed about worth would shatter forever. The sun rose over Ridgewood Academy on graduation day, golden light spilling across polished floors and marble staircases. Students in crisp uniforms filed into the auditorium, mothers adjusting pearl necklaces, fathers straightening ties, all eyes on the stage where the ceremony would begin. Cameras clicked, capturing smiles, laughter, and rehearsed applause. The janitor stood near the back, his uniform freshly washed, shoes polished to a soft shine. He felt conspicuously out of place amidst the wealth and elegance surrounding him. He did not sit, he did not speak, he only stood, hands folded, heart pounding. Today would not just be a graduation, it would be a reckoning. Across the hall, students whispered, glancing at the girl seated in the front rows. She sat quietly, hands folded neatly in her lap, her navy blue dress simple yet elegant, the kind that spoke of restraint and quiet dignity. Eyes followed her as if expecting her to stumble, expecting her to falter under the weight of ridicule she had carried for 12 years. "She's sitting in the front? Did they make a mistake?" one girl whispered. "Her dad cleans the bathrooms," another said, smirking. The girl did not respond. She had learned long ago that words from those who did not matter could be safely ignored. What they could not know was how much she had prepared for this moment, how carefully every step had been planned in her mind for years. Every essay she had written, every night she had stayed up studying while others partied, every insult she had endured silently, it had all led to this. She was ready. A hush fell over the room as the principal stepped forward to begin the ceremony. The audience applauded politely, the sound echoing softly against the marble walls. But all eyes, consciously or unconsciously, avoided the janitor. He blended into the background, invisible as always. The ceremony progressed, diplomas handed to students who had already been celebrated in whispered conversations and public praise. Then the moment arrived. The principal cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention. "Before we begin awarding diplomas, we will honor this year's valedictorian." A pause. Silence stretched, pregnant with anticipation. The students who had mocked her laughed nervously, whispering to one another. Surely it could not be her. "This student has demonstrated exceptional academic achievement and remarkable resilience," the principal continued. "Someone who has persevered despite challenges most of us cannot imagine." A murmur rippled through the room. Heads turned subtly, searching the audience, looking for someone tall, someone polished, someone they could recognize as worthy of the title. But their eyes met only her, quiet and composed, and for the first time a sense of unease passed through them. The principal's next words carried slowly, deliberately, each syllable dropping like a pebble into still water. "The valedictorian of Ridgewood Academy is—" He paused, long enough to make hearts race, to make disbelief settle into the room like a fog. "The janitor's daughter!" Gasps erupted, mouths fell open, whispers turned to exclamations. Some students laughed, uncertain whether this was a joke. Others froze, realization dawning slowly. The janitor's hands flew to his mouth, his knees weakened, he could barely breathe. 12 years of being unseen, 12 years of sacrifice, all converging in this single, impossible moment. The girl stood. She did not rush, did not stumble. She moved steadily, each step deliberate, measured, commanding without arrogance. She walked as if the marble floors themselves had acknowledged her worth, acknowledging that every floor he had polished, every surface he had cared for, had led to this moment of justice. Students who had whispered insults now stared in disbelief. They had laughed at her quietly, mocked her relentlessly, assumed she would never arise. And yet here she was, walking to the stage with a poise that silenced 100 taunts in a single glance. The janitor's eyes brimmed with tears. He had not allowed himself to cry in public for decades, but now, seeing her ascend to the stage, the dam broke. Quiet sobs escaped, shaking his frame as the audience collectively held its breath. When she reached the podium, she paused, surveying the room. The auditorium seemed impossibly large, filled with faces that had once overlooked her existence. And yet she did not falter. She grasped the edges of the podium, straightened her shoulders, and spoke. "I was told I didn't belong here," her voice said, soft but unwavering. The words carried through the room, reaching ears that had never truly listened before. "I was told my family was invisible, that our lives were not worthy of recognition." Her father bowed his head. She spoke on, continuing to surprise and hold the room. "But every night someone cleaned these floors so that you could walk on them safely. Every day someone showed up, invisible to you, so that dreams could continue quietly in the shadows. That person is my father." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Murmurs rippled, faces paled. Students who had whispered cruelty were now silent, their laughter trapped in their throats. "I have learned strength not from applause, but from the knowledge that being unseen does not mean being worthless. My father taught me that dignity is carried, not shown. Resilience is quiet, but it shapes every step we take in life." She paused, letting the words sink in. The silence that followed was profound, heavier than any laughter could have been. Every insult, every mocking comment, every sideways glance from the past years weighed on the students' hearts. Then she turned her gaze toward him. Her father, who had given so much without recognition, who had never asked for acknowledgement, who had endured invisibility without complaint, he was finally seen. And in that moment, the room shifted. Applause began softly, hesitant at first, then growing steadily. Teachers clapped, some wiping tears from their eyes. Parents murmured congratulations in tones tinged with regret for the way they had judged. Even the students, once mocking, now stood uncertainly, witnessing a truth they could not ignore. The principal handed her the diploma. She accepted it gracefully, nodding to him and then glancing at the audience. Her voice returned to them once more, calm and deliberate. "To those who ever doubted the unseen, who overlooked the quiet, and who judged by appearances alone, this is for you to remember. Strength can walk silently, greatness can be invisible, and courage is not always loud, but it is always present." The auditorium was silent again. The students who had mocked her could find no words. Their assumptions had been dismantled by patience, perseverance, and quiet dignity. Her father's chest heaved. Tears rolled down his face. He could barely speak, but one word escaped his lips: "My daughter." The ceremony continued, but the impact lingered. Every face had been touched by something unexpected. The girl who had endured whispers, ridicule, and disregard had rewritten what they thought they knew about worth. As the audience dispersed, some approached her with tentative apologies. Others left in silence, contemplative, unable to articulate their emotions. The janitor waited at the back. He did not need apologies. He did not need recognition. What mattered was seeing her arise, seeing her claim a place in a world that long ignored them both. Later, outside, the streets were alive with life, but the father and daughter walked home quietly, shoulders straight, heads held high. For years they had existed in shadows. Now they walked in the light. and the light was enough. The applause still echoed faintly in the auditorium as she stepped down from the podium. Every eye followed her. Students who had laughed and whispered behind her back now watched in disbelief. Some bowed their heads in shame. Some could not move, frozen by the undeniable truth they had ignored for years. Her father, standing just behind her, let the tears fall freely. He had never imagined this moment, not in his wildest dreams. 12 years of invisible labor, endless sacrifice, silent nights of worry and hope, all converged in this single extraordinary hour. Students began to approach her, some hesitantly, others awkwardly. I'm sorry," a girl murmured, her eyes downcast. "I didn't understand before." Another student added, "You were amazing. I judged too quickly." She nodded quietly. She accepted their apologies not with pride, but with grace. There was no gloating, no sense of triumph. She had achieved this victory not to punish others, but to show that endurance, patience, and quiet strength mattered more than words ever could. Outside the auditorium, the ceremony's chaos faded into a calm afternoon. Parents hugged their children, cameras clicked, teachers whispered congratulations. Yet the most meaningful moments occurred in silence. The janitor and his daughter walked slowly down the steps, away from the crowds. He looked at her, the weight of his own life reflected in her steady gaze. "You were brave today," he said, voice trembling. She smiled softly. "You were first, Papa." They walked together through the school's front gates, leaving behind the polished halls and whispering classrooms. The streets outside were alive with life, students laughing, cars rushing, distant music floating on the air. But for a moment, the world felt still. The girl stopped briefly, looking back at the school one last time. The marble floors, the towering windows, the familiar doors, it had all been a stage of invisibility, yet she had risen above it. Every lesson her father had taught her, every night she had endured, every quiet moment of perseverance had prepared her for this. "Do you think they understand now?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Some may not. But that is not for us to decide. What matters is that you know your worth, and now, so do I." The moment was simple yet monumental. Years of hardship, ridicule, and invisibility condensed into one afternoon where recognition, justice, and dignity prevailed. The crowd would remember her speech, but only she and her father truly understood the depth of the journey that led to it. That evening, as they returned to their modest home, the quiet streets welcomed them. The lights of the city reflected in puddles, small reminders of the world's ongoing rush, yet they walked slowly, savoring each step. Her father set down her belongings carefully, as he had always done, and she noticed the faint ache in his hands and back. "You know," she said, "all these years I thought I had to carry the burden alone. But you carried us both." He looked at her, tired eyes softening, lips pressing into a faint smile. "And you carried yourself. That is why today mattered. Not for them, for you." She nodded. The world had not changed. Some would continue judging, some would continue ignoring, some would continue mocking, but one truth remained unshakable. Strength often goes unnoticed, but it never truly disappears. For the next few days, the story spread. Teachers whispered it to colleagues, parents recounted it to friends. Students, even those who had once mocked her, found themselves thinking differently about courage, perseverance, and quiet dignity. Her father did not watch the news. He did not check the internet. He simply cleaned the floors as he always had, yet with a different sense of purpose. Today, his labor had become more than routine. It had been honored through the eyes of his daughter and the acknowledgement of the world she now commanded.
The girl, now officially a graduate and valedictorian, sat at her desk that evening and began to write. Not essays, not school assignments, but letters. Letters to those who had overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed people like her and her father. Letters filled with the message she had lived and witnessed. Dignity is quiet, strength is patient, and courage often comes from those the world refuses to see. Her first letter began simply, "To the world that does not notice the janitor, the quiet student, the overlooked child, this is for you. Pay attention, for greatness often walks silently, and the lessons it teaches are worth listening to." That night, father and daughter sat side by side, the exhaustion of years pressing upon them, yet a deep sense of fulfillment warming them. The janitor had raised a daughter who embodied every principle he had tried to teach by example. She had turned his invisible labor into visible triumph, and in doing so, they had both claimed a place in the world that had long ignored them. Later, lying in bed, the girl reflected on all the moments she had endured, every whispered insult, every mocking laugh, every time she had been overlooked. None of it had been wasted. Each had shaped her, each had prepared her, and now, standing at the precipice of the future, she understood the truth that her father had known all along. Visibility is not given, it is earned, and worth is not defined by the applause of others, but the quiet integrity and resilience one carries every day. Her final thought before sleep came softly. One day, the world will see everyone who works in silence. Today, it saw me, and tomorrow, it will see more. The janitor, sleeping in the next room, dreamed of floors polished and corridors emptied of doubt. He dreamed of a world where invisible labor was honored and invisible people were recognized. And though he would rise again at dawn to continue his work, he knew something fundamental had shifted. Their lives had been seen, their worth acknowledged, their journey validated. Because sometimes the quietest footsteps echo the longest. And sometimes the most overlooked people carry the strength to change everything.
The ceremony had ended. The applause faded, leaving behind a quiet stillness that spoke louder than words. The students returned to their homes, parents gathered their children, and the teachers slowly closed their notes and files. But for the janitor and his daughter, the day had only just begun. They walked home together in silence, the weight of the past years lifting with each step. The streets seemed brighter somehow, filled with possibilities that had previously seemed distant and unattainable. She glanced at her father, noticing the lines on his face, the weariness in his hands, and the strength that had carried them both through hardship. "You know, Papa," she said softly, "today wasn't just about me." He shook his head. No, it was about all the invisible people, all the unnoticed labor, the quiet sacrifices. Today, they were seen through you. She smiled, understanding. All the nights she had studied while others played, all the essays she had written in secret, all the whispered insults endured silently, they had all prepared her for this moment. And now, through her, the world had glimpsed the strength of those who live unseen. Later, they returned to their modest home. The janitor set her graduation dress aside, folded carefully, as he always treated the small things with meticulous care. He poured a cup of tea for her, and together they sat by the window, watching the lights of the city flicker in quiet reflection. "You've made me proud beyond words," he whispered. "You've made me proud too," she replied. They sat in silence, knowing that recognition from the world was fleeting, but the acknowledgement between them was permanent. The journey had not been easy. It had been filled with invisible struggles, whispered doubts,
and countless moments of exhaustion and despair. Yet through it all, they had remained steadfast, grounded in patience, dignity, and resilience. The girl thought of her classmates, some of whom had laughed, others who had doubted. Their opinions no longer held power over her. They were shadows, irrelevant compared to the sunlight of truth and achievement. And her father, who had given everything without expectation, stood as the living testament to quiet strength. "This is the lesson," she said, turning to him, voice filled with conviction. "People will doubt, mock, and ignore, but that does not determine your value. The world may not see your efforts, but integrity and perseverance will always shine in their own way." He nodded. "And sometimes the world only notices when the time is right. Today, through you, it saw more than just a graduation. It saw all the sacrifices, all the quiet courage, all the love that went unseen for years." As the night deepened, they prepared for rest. Tomorrow, life would return to routine. The floors would need cleaning, the neighborhood would buzz with its usual rhythm, and the challenges of life would continue. Yet the memory of this day would endure, a permanent marker of triumph against invisibility, of dignity against scorn, and of love against neglect. Before sleep, the girl wrote one final note in her journal. "Greatness often walks quietly. Courage is often invisible, but every act of integrity, every moment of perseverance, every sacrifice made in silence leaves an imprint that time cannot erase. To those who feel unseen, stand tall. Keep going. The world will notice, even if it takes longer than you expect. And when it does, let your light shine, not for applause, but because you finally know your worth." Her father looked over her shoulder and smiled. "You've carried us both to a place where we belong," he said softly. And in that moment, the truth was undeniable. Their journey through ridicule, hardship, and invisibility had culminated in something eternal. Recognition had come not through privilege, wealth, or status, but through patience, perseverance, and unwavering courage. Sometimes life does not announce victories with fanfare. Sometimes the strongest footsteps are the quietest, and sometimes those who are overlooked carry the power to change not only their own lives, but the hearts of everyone around them. As the lights dimmed in their small home and silence settled, they slept peacefully, carrying the knowledge that dignity, courage, and love had won, and that no one, no matter how invisible they may seem, would ever truly be unseen again. The world had learned a lesson. The janitor and his daughter had lived it, and the echoes of their perseverance would resonate far beyond the walls of Ridgewood Academy. Because sometimes the quietest footsteps echo the longest, and sometimes the invisible carry the greatest strength.